I walked into the glass lobby of Norcrest Biowell, my left foot throbbing like steel wire tightening around the ankle. "She's limping," my stepmother, Vivian, chuckled, just loud enough for her team to hear. My grandfather, Rowan Maddox, the company's founder, tilted his head. "Why is she limping?" Before I could answer, he signaled his assistant. A silent audit began with that single question. "My name is Avery Lane. I'm 32, and I am the head of ethics and compliance at Norcrest Biowell." The Norcrest headquarters in West Haven is designed to intimidate. It's a 2-story atrium of steel and triple-paned glass, a monument to transparent, sterile, and extremely profitable biotech. The air is chilled to a perfect 68 degrees and smells of industrial-strength coffee from the lobby's barista bar and the faint, ozonic hum of the air purification system. Every sound is an echo: the click of a heel, the swipe of a badge, the murmur of a conversation. All of it bounces off the expanse of polished white stone flooring, amplified and cold. It's a place where you are always seen, always heard. I was holding a black leather portfolio containing the board presentation. The leather was smooth and cool, but my grip was tight enough to make my knuckles ache. A counterpoint to the primary pain radiating from my left foot, with every step toward the elevator bank, a sharp, metallic agony shot from my ankle to my knee. It felt like the joint was packed with crushed glass. I was actively fighting to keep the limp from becoming a stagger. Focusing on a precise, measured cadence. Right foot strong, left foot light, mask neutral. The pain was new, a gift from last night, a mishap in the executive parking garage on level P3. I had been working late, finalizing the very data in this portfolio. When I reached my car, I found 2 things: the acrid, oily smell of brake fluid, and a thin, high-tensile wire strung between 2 concrete pillars. Perfectly at ankle height, the camera pointed directly at that spot. P3B had been offline, a coincidental system glitch. According to the security email sent out this morning, the glitch window was exactly 37 minutes, bracketing my departure time. I felt her eyes on me before I heard her voice. Vivian Maddox, my stepmother and the executive vice president of human resources, was standing with her own team near the security turnstiles. She was flawless, as always, in a severe charcoal gray dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight, architectural knot. She watched me approach, her gaze clinical as it dropped from my face to my limping foot. "Don't be ridiculous during the board meeting, Avery," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was pitched to carry, a performance for her audience. It was a perfectly crafted corporate dismissal. It didn't ask if I was hurt. It accused me of being a spectacle. It implied drama, weakness, a lack of control. In the Norcrest lobby, a lack of control was a fatal flaw. Her team, a small cluster of ambitious HR associates, produced the required sound, a short, sharp burst of laughter. It was brittle and insincere, the sound of people laughing because their boss expects it. One of them, a junior analyst named Mark, even lifted his phone. The black screen angled toward me. He was filming, recording the weakness. A small, satisfied smile played on his lips until he caught the eye of the uniformed security guard by the main desk. The phone immediately lowered, slipping back into his pocket. The move was fluid, practiced. They weren't ashamed. They were just annoyed at being interrupted. I didn't break stride. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on the silver line of the elevator doors, my entire focus on maintaining my composure. The pain in my ankle was a hot, grounding reality. The humiliation was a cold fog. Then the lobby's ambient noise changed. It didn't just quiet down. It compressed. The air pressure shifted. My grandfather, Rowan Maddox, had entered the building. He was the founder, the patriarch, the largest single shareholder of Norcrest Biowell. He walked with his personal assistant, a man named Hale, who was perpetually silent and carried a thin titanium briefcase. Rowan himself was in his late 70s, wearing a simple dark blue suit that was probably tailored in London 40 years ago and still looked better than anything else in this building. He didn't stride, he simply moved, and the lobby parted for him. His gaze swept the atrium once, cataloging everything. He saw Vivian and her team, their sudden, rigid posture of respect. He saw me, 20 feet away, and my calculated, painful progress. His eyes, still sharp and pale blue, didn't linger on my face. They moved directly to my left foot, noting the slight swelling above the line of my leather pump. The way I refused to put my full weight on it, he watched me take 2 more steps. He stopped. The entire lobby held its breath. "Why are you limping?" His voice was calm, almost academic. It wasn't a question of concern like, "Are you all right?" That question is a social nicety, one that begs for a polite, false answer. "I'm fine, just a little stumble." Rowan Maddox did not deal in social niceties. He asked, why? He demanded data. The lobby was utterly silent. Vivian's smile was frozen in place. Her team looked like they'd been flash frozen. The lie formed instantly on my tongue. I just tripped on the stairs at home. It was easy. It was clean. It was what everyone, including Vivian, expected me to say. It would smooth the moment over, diffuse the tension, and allow the corporate day to proceed. But as I opened my mouth, I was overwhelmed by a phantom smell. The sharp, chemical bite of brake fluid. I could feel the ghost of its slick, viscous residue on my fingertips from when I had touched my brake line last night. I remembered the unnatural tightness of the wire just before it snapped. This wasn't a trip. This was a calculated act of violence. This was an attempt to keep me out of the board meeting today. The silence stretched. I saw Vivian's eyes narrow, just slightly. She knew I was hesitating. I looked at my grandfather. I said nothing. Rowan watched my face. He saw the lie I didn't tell. He registered the flicker of defiance, the calculation, and the cold, controlled anger underneath. He didn't need me to speak. My silence was a louder, more complete answer than any words I could have given. He didn't wait any longer. He turned his head slightly toward his assistant. "Call Auditor Hale." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an activation. Auditor Hale. Not the assistant. Auditor Hale, the man whose name was only ever spoken in hushed tones, the man who handled internal matters that never, ever made it to an HR file. Hale was the corporate surgeon. He was the one Rowan called when he needed something cut out, quietly and with extreme prejudice. The assistant, the man named Hale, merely nodded, already pulling his secured phone from his jacket pocket. A quiet whoosh of sound left the lobby, as if every person in the atrium had exhaled at once. The clicking of keyboards at the security desk stopped. The barista froze, steam wand in hand. I looked back at Vivian. The frozen professional smile was gone. In its place was a tiny, sharp, genuine smirk. It was fleeting, but I saw it. It was the absolute, unshakable confidence of a predator who believed she had covered her tracks. She thought Rowan was just rattling a cage. She thought this was just another move in the game. She was wrong. My grandfather doesn't rattle cages. He demolishes them. And I had the bolt cutters in my portfolio. The elevator dinged. The sound was sharp, cutting through the heavy silence that had fallen in the lobby. I took a step, then another. The pain in my ankle a hot, angry pulse. I could feel every eye in the atrium on my back, a physical weight of scrutiny. Vivian's, sharp and furious, her team's, nervous and confused, and Rowan's, which I couldn't feel at all. His was a one-way mirror. Rowan Maddox hadn't built Norcrest Biowell. He had conjured it. He was a scientist, a researcher from an era when discovery was the goal, not the quarterly return. He and my grandmother, Elena, had started the company in a university lab, funded by a second mortgage and an unshakable belief that they could cure degenerative nerve diseases, and they had. Norcrest's first blockbuster drug had changed the world, and my grandfather, in the process. He was the company. His DNA was in its mission statements, in the structural steel of the building. But when my grandmother died, the light in him dimmed. The relentless, obsessive drive that had built an empire turned inward. He retired. He became chairman emeritus, a title created for him, designed to keep his name on the letterhead and his hands off the daily operations. He still attended the quarterly board meetings, sitting at the head of the table, rarely speaking. The new board, the one Vivian had helped stack, treated him like a living statue, an object of reverence and, increasingly, an obstacle to be managed. They mistook his grief-stricken silence for senility, a fatal error. Into that vacuum of power stepped Vivian, my father, lost in his own fog of grief. Met her at a hospital charity auction. 6 months later, they were married. I was 23, just graduated from law school, and I came home for the summer to find this woman, only 10 years my senior, evaluating the silver. The wedding was a quiet, tasteful, and brutally efficient affair at the county courthouse. Too fast. The ink on my grandmother's death certificate was barely dry. It felt less like a marriage and more like an acquisition. Vivian's ascent within Norcrest was just as rapid and just as unnatural. She didn't come from science. She came from money. Specifically, she came from Grayford Capital, a private equity firm in New York that specialized in optimizing legacy companies. Grayford had bought a minority, non-voting stake in Norcrest a year prior, a move Rowan had silently opposed. Vivian was their human capital solution. She was installed as Executive Vice President of Human Resources, a position that, under her control, became the company's central nervous system. She didn't just hire and fire, she restructured, reallocated, and reprioritized the entire corporate body. Publicly, Vivian was a masterpiece of modern executive branding. She was the face of Norcrest's charitable foundation. She was on the cover of West Haven Business Quarterly. 3 months ago, pictured in a hard hat at the site of a new all-female STEM high school. Her check presentation smile perfected. Her social media was a curated stream of inspirational quotes about female leadership and photos of her speaking on panels for women in biotech. She was, to the world, the compassionate, progressive future of the company, the perfect antidote to Rowan's old world, stoic image. In private, inside the glass walls of this building, she was a surgeon with a rusty blade. Her first act as EVP was to streamline operations for a new era of growth. This meant, in practice, cutting the legal and compliance departments by 40%. The old guard, as she called them, lawyers and auditors who, like me, believed the rules existed for a reason, were replaced by a small, outsourced team of legal consultants who reported directly to her. Projects that had been bogged down in ethical review, particularly a new diagnostic tool with a high false positive rate, were suddenly fast-tracked. "We can't let perfect be the enemy of good," she'd said in a town hall, her voice dripping with reasonable compassion. "We have a duty to our shareholders and our patients to get these solutions to market. We are on schedule." I was the outlier. I was the stubborn one, the legacy problem she couldn't fire. As Rowan's granddaughter, I was untouchable in an overt way. As a compliance lawyer who had chosen this path specifically to protect my grandfather's work, I was a constant, predictable obstruction. I could have gone anywhere. Marketing, business development, investor relations. Vivian would have loved that. She would have given me a corner office and a special projects title and neutralized me with prestige. But I chose the ethics and compliance division. It was the company's conscience, and she had been systematically trying to sever it. In every projection meeting, I was the one raising my hand, the one asking about the data integrity, the one flagging the conflict of interest with a new supplier. I was Avery, the singular name spoken with a sigh. I was brilliant, but not a team player. I was an obstacle to growth. In one memorable meeting with the Grayford investors, I had presented a mandatory risk assessment report. Vivian had smiled, placing her hand on my arm. "Thank you, Avery, for that charmingly academic exercise. Now, if we can move on to the actual growth projections." Rowan saw it all. He sat in those board meetings, quiet as stone, but his eyes missed nothing. I learned to watch him watch others. I saw him note the executive who checked his phone 3 times while I was presenting. I saw him track the subtle shift in seating arrangements, how Vivian's allies now sat clustered together, insulating her. I saw his gaze linger on the Grayford VP, who avoided looking at him after pushing through a budget cut to long-term research. Rowan was a quiet man, but he was a collector of details. He stockpiled them. He never forgot who was late, who changed their vote, or who avoided his eye. From the day Vivian moved into my grandmother's house, I learned to do the same. Her arrival taught me that words in that family were weapons or camouflage, so I stopped using them. I learned to speak less and to document everything. My real work began after hours. Every meeting I attended was followed by a typed, time-stamped email summarizing the discussion and action items, sent to all attendees. Just for clarity, I would write, it was my defense. It forced their verbal, off-the-cuff directives into a permanent, searchable record. Vivian and her team hated it. They thought it was naive, a bureaucratic tic. They mistook my meticulousness for fear. It wasn't fear. It was the slow, patient, and methodical construction of a fortress. My office wasn't just an office. It was an archive. I had encrypted off-site backups of every contract Vivian had streamlined, every email she had recalled, every whistleblower complaint that had been resolved by her HR department within hours of submission. I wasn't just a lawyer. I was the company's historian, and I was waiting. The elevator doors opened with a soft sigh. I stepped inside, the cold, mirrored steel reflecting my strained face. As the doors began to close, my eyes caught the words etched in giant, sandblasted letters across the glass wall of the atrium, the company's official slogan, commissioned by Vivian herself in her first month. Healing through transparency. I pressed the button for the 27th floor. That slogan had cost the company $80,000. It was a beautiful, expensive poster. Transparency, in Norcrest, was a one-way street. It was what they demanded of the lower-level employees. A tool to monitor, to surveil, to control. It was never meant to be aimed up. It was something you were supposed to look through, at the bright, profitable future, not to see the rot in the foundation. Today, I was going to change the angle of the light. Last night hadn't been an accident. It had been an execution. I had left the office at 10:05 p.m. The executive garage on P3 was a concrete tomb, silent except for the high-pitched whine of the ventilation system and the echo of my own heels on the oil-stained floor. Most of the spaces were empty, reserved for the VPs and C-suite who had left hours ago. My silver sedan was parked in its assigned spot, P3B, tucked between 2 massive concrete support pillars. I was 20 feet away when the smell hit me. It was sharp, oily, and wrong. It cut through the usual garage odors of cold concrete and old exhaust. It was the acrid chemical smell of brake fluid. A car doesn't just spontaneously bleed brake fluid. Not like this. I stopped, my hand tightening on the strap of my laptop bag. My eyes scanned the shadows. Nothing. I approached my car slowly. Under the driver's side front wheel, a dark, iridescent stain was spreading, glistening under the buzzing fluorescent lights. It was a fresh puddle. My stomach tightened. Had my brake line been cut? Was this a warning? I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight and aiming the beam at the wheel well. I bent forward, trying to see the source of the leak. My focus narrowed to the dark, wet metal. And that's when my left foot hit the wire. It wasn't a stumble. It was an amputation. A thin, viciously strong filament, it felt like high-tensile fishing line or caving wire, was stretched taut between the 2 concrete pillars. It was strung at a height of about 6 inches, perfectly designed to catch an ankle in the dark, invisible to a casual glance and impossible to see if you were distracted. Distracted, as I was, by the brake fluid. The wire didn't break. It caught. My foot stopped. But my body kept going. The laws of physics are unforgiving. I was pitched forward with violent, sudden force. In that millisecond of pure, weightless panic, Only one thought articulated itself. The presentation. I didn't throw my hands out to catch myself. I twisted my entire body in midair, clutching the leather portfolio and my laptop bag to my chest, turning my shoulder to take the impact. I hit the concrete, hard. The first impact was my right knee, which struck the ground with a sound like a wet towel hitting tile, a sickening rip as my trousers tore. The second was my shoulder. The third, and worst, was my left ankle, still tangled in the wire, which twisted at an angle it was never meant to take. A raw, white-hot explosion of pain. It was so intense, so immediate, that I couldn't even scream. All the air was forced from my lungs. I lay there, gasping, on the cold, gritty floor. The smell of brake fluid was overpowering, now mixed with the coppery, metallic scent of my own blood from my knee. For a full 30 seconds, I just breathed. In, out. Do not pass out. Do not go into shock. The pain in my ankle wasn't a throb. It was a constant, screaming siren. Then, the cold reality flooded in. The brake fluid was a distraction. The wire was the trap. This was not random vandalism. This was a targeted, methodical, two-stage assault. This was about the board meeting. This was about the presentation in my laptop bag. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, cut through the pain. I was no longer a victim. I was a compliance officer conducting a field investigation. I didn't move, not yet. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my movements were precise. I opened the camera app. First, I photographed the wire, still looped around my swollen ankle. The flash illuminated its thin, silvery, almost invisible line. I followed it with the camera, capturing the crude but effective knot tied around the base of the pillar to my left, and then to the pillar on my right. I photographed the puddle of brake fluid, the nozzle of the plastic container peeking out from where it had been kicked under my car. It wasn't a leak. It was a pour. I photographed the deep, bloody gash in my knee, the torn fabric of my slacks. I photographed the scuff marks on the floor from where I had fallen. Then I switched to video. Holding the phone steady, I narrated in a low, shaking whisper. Time is 22:07. Location is Norcrest Garage. Level P3, Bay B. I have been assaulted. I recorded the scene, the wire, the fluid, the lack of other people. Every photo, every video file was now embedded with a non-editable, verifiable timestamp and geolocation metadata. I gritted my teeth, pushed myself up onto my elbows, and untangled my foot from the wire. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. The wire had cut through my stocking, leaving a thin, burning line on my skin. I forced myself to stand, leaning heavily on my right leg. The world swam in a gray, painful haze for a moment. I looked up. The black security camera dome in the corner, P3B, was aimed directly at this spot. Its small, red indicator light was dark, dead. I limped to the stairwell, one agonizing step at a time, each footfall sending a shockwave of fire up my leg. I didn't take the elevator. An elevator could be intercepted. A stairwell was empty. It took me 20 minutes to get to my apartment. I bypassed the emergency room. A hospital visit would create a public record. It would trigger insurance flags. It would alert HR. It would alert Vivian. I would not give her that satisfaction. I would handle the pain. I sat on my bathroom floor, pouring hydrogen peroxide over my knee, the stinging foam turning pink. I wrapped my ankle in an ice pack and a compression bandage. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a deep, seismic trembling in my muscles. Then, I went to work. I booted up my encrypted work terminal and connected to the company servers via a secure VPN. First, I checked the security system logs. Just as I suspected, the camera monitoring P3B had reported a signal loss event at 21:45. It had come back online at 22:22. A precise 37-minute window, a window that had opened just before I left my desk and closed just after I was discovered. Signal loss, not a malfunction, a deliberate disconnection. Second, I pulled the access logs for the P3 elevator lobby and stairwell, badge swipes, Everyone who entered or left the secure zones was logged. My own badge swipe, leaving the office, 22:04. And there, 20 minutes before, Vivian's executive assistant, Kyle Devon. He badged out of the P3 stairwell at 21:48, right after the camera feed cut. Then, he badged back in at 22:12, just 10 minutes after my fall. Why would he be in the garage, then leave, then come back? He was the cleanup crew, or he was the lookout. It was a thread. Third, I checked my ethics hotline inbox. This was the anonymous, secure email address I managed, the one employees were supposed to use to report misconduct. A new message had arrived at 21:15 before I even left my office. The subject line was simple: board meeting. The message was 4 short, chilling sentences. Don't present tomorrow. They are not messing around. It's not worth it. Take a sick day. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. It was the intent, delivered in writing. They had tried to warn me off, and when I didn't reply, they had escalated. I saved everything: the photographs, the video, with its pristine metadata, the server logs showing the 37-minute camera outage, the access logs placing Vivian's assistant at the scene, the anonymous email. I compiled them all into a single, password-protected, encrypted archive. I uploaded it to the department's triple-redundant, off-site digital vault, the one managed by our external legal counsel. It was the official chain of custody protocol. The evidence was now secure, admissible, and out of Vivian's reach. I sat back, my ankle throbbing in time with my pulse. The obvious move was to call the police, file a report, an assault. But I knew exactly what would happen. It would become a bureaucratic nightmare. He said, she said. It would be investigated as low-level vandalism, and most importantly, it would tip my hand. It would warn Vivian that I had the evidence. She would deploy her army of lawyers. She would destroy whatever secondary evidence was left. She would gaslight, and she would paint me as unstable, paranoid, clumsy. She would say I was manufacturing a crisis to gain leverage before the board meeting. No, I wasn't going to report a crime. I was going to solve one. The police were not the right weapon. The Norcrest BioWell corporate governance structure was. I wanted to see who panicked first. I wanted to watch their faces when I walked into that boardroom. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up. A new text message. 11:47 p.m. It was from Vivian. Avery, just checking in. You left late. Hope you got home all right. Heard from your director you were feeling a bit under the weather today. If you feel unwell tomorrow, please don't push yourself. I would be more than happy to present your compliance report for you. We're a team, after all. Get some rest. I read the text twice. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The preemptive alibi. Heard you were under the weather. The compassionate offer. I can present, for you, the motive, handed to me on a silver platter, complete with a smiling emoji. She wasn't just checking if I was hurt. She was checking if the plan had worked. She was testing the waters to see if I was sufficiently intimidated or incapacitated. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked up the phone. The pain in my ankle was a sharp, cold clarity. It wasn't a weakness. It was a focus. It was a reminder. I typed my reply, 5 words, no emotion, no accusation, just a confirmation of attendance. See you in the boardroom. I hit send. The trap was set. Now, I just had to survive walking into it. The 27th floor boardroom was where Norcrest's power was formalized. It was a glass box in the sky, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, offering a panoramic, godlike view of West Haven and the river below. The table was a single, 30-foot slab of polished black granite. So reflective it looked like a dark pool of water. It was designed to make you feel exposed, magnificent, and insignificant all at once. I was the last to arrive, a deliberate choice. I pushed the heavy glass door open and walked in. The pain from my ankle was a sharp, clear signal, cutting through the adrenaline. Every head turned. The entire board was present. The CFO, the COO, the 2 venture partners from Grayford Capital, my father, looking pale and uncomfortable, and Vivian, sitting to the right of Rowan's empty chair at the head of the table, and my grandfather, Rowan, at the head, looking not at me, but at the city skyline. "Avery, you're late," Vivian said. It wasn't a question. It was a public notation of my failure. Her voice was a smooth, compassionate blade. "We were just about to start without you." "My apologies," I said, my voice flat and cold. I was documenting an unbudgeted infrastructure failure. I walked the length of the table, each step a carefully controlled agony. I didn't sit in my usual chair at the far end, the one reserved for junior executives and compliance heads. I sat in the empty chair directly to Rowan's left, opposite Vivian, a nonverbal challenge. I felt her stare, hot and sharp, on the side of my face. Vivian, recovering quickly, flashed a brilliant professional smile at the rest of the board. "Excellent. Then let's begin." She clicked her remote. The massive screen at the end of the room lit up. She had, as always, altered the agenda. Before the quarterly financials, before the R&D pipeline, before my compliance report, she had inserted her own presentation. The title slide read, "A culture of care, our people, our priority." "Before we get into the numbers," she began, her voice radiating empathetic leadership, "I want to reaffirm our commitment to the real asset of Norcrest, our people. This quarter, HR has launched 3 new initiatives." She spoke of mental health apps, flexible work schedules, and mindfulness workshops. It was a beautiful, hollow performance. She was preemptively establishing her narrative. She was the guardian of employee well-being. She was on her third slide, a pie chart about work-life integration, when I reached down to the portfolio in my lap. I pulled out a clear, 9 by 12-inch Ziploc evidence bag. I placed it on the black granite table. The sound was small, just a soft thwack of plastic on stone, but in the hushed room, it was as loud as a gunshot. Inside the bag, coiled like a dead snake, was the thin, silvery, high-tensile wire from the garage. Next to it, I had placed one of the work gloves I'd found shoved behind a recycling bin on P3, the one stained with the unmistakable dark, oily residue of brake fluid. No one spoke. Vivian's monologue on proactive wellness trailed off. Every eye was locked on the bag. The 2 VCs from Grayford Capital exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated confusion. My father frowned, opening his mouth as if to ask a question, then closing it. Vivian was the first to regain her composure. She produced a small, brittle laugh. It was a social sound, designed to dismiss, to frame my action as absurd. "Avery, my goodness," she said, her voice laced with the kind of condescending pity one reserves for a disturbed child. "What is this? Are we doing arts and crafts?" She turned to the board, her smile widening, inviting them to share in the joke. "Everyone, you'll have to forgive Avery. She had a little accident at home last night." She looked directly at me, her eyes cold and triumphant. This was her move. Gaslight me in front of the board. She dropped a vase, I believe, sliced her foot on some broken glass. Vivian shook her head, a perfect pantomime of exasperated affection. "She's an artist, you know, so wonderfully dramatic. But Avery, darling, this is a board meeting. Put your things away." The lie was so specific, broken glass, so clean, so domestic, so clumsy, a perfect airtight narrative to explain my limp and dismiss my evidence in one stroke. I didn't look at her. I looked at my grandfather. Rowan was still. He hadn't looked at the bag. He hadn't looked at Vivian. He was watching me. He was waiting. I met his gaze, and I held it. I saw the lie land in his mind. He processed it, broken glass at home. Then his eyes flicked, just once, down to the Ziploc bag, to the industrial caving wire and the oil-stained glove. The 2 narratives collided. Vivian's simple, domestic lie, and my silent, complex, industrial truth. Rowan Maddox did not like being lied to. He turned his hand over on the granite table. With the tip of his middle finger, He tapped the stone. Tap, tap, tap. It was his signal, the one I hadn't heard in 3 years. It was the signal for Auditor Hale. The boardroom door opened. Almost instantly, the silent assistant, Hale, stepped inside. He was no longer just an assistant. He was the auditor. He moved with a different, more lethal purpose. In his hand, he held a thick 9 by 12-inch manila envelope, sealed with red wax. Vivian's smile tightened. She had not expected this. "Rowan, what is this? We're in the middle of my presentation." "No," Rowan said, his voice quiet but filling the entire room. "We are not." Hale walked the length of the table and placed the envelope in front of my grandfather. Rowan didn't open it. He just pushed it, slowly, across the reflective granite surface toward the center of the table. "Mr. Hale," Rowan said. "The P3 garage." Hale spoke for the first time. His voice was a dry, precise monotone. "At 21:45 last night, the security camera at Bay P3B was manually disconnected from the server. The outage lasted 37 minutes. At 21:48, an executive badge was used to exit the P3 stairwell. At 22:12, the same badge was used to re-enter." Vivian shifted in her chair. "An infrastructure glitch. It happens." "We've cross-referenced departmental purchasing logs for the last 30 days, Hale continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "We found an anomalous purchase, a 1-liter container of .4 brake fluid and 50 feet of 0.5 millimeter, 300-pound test braided steel caving wire." My father sucked in a sharp breath. The Grayford VCs were no longer confused. They were sitting bolt upright, their faces hardening. "The purchase," Hale said, "was made yesterday at 21:34. It was charged to a corporate expense card." He paused, and for the first time, he looked directly at Vivian. "The card belongs to Kyle Devon, of your Human Resources Department." The silence in the room was absolute. Vivian's face had gone pale, but the smile was still plastered on. It was a rictus. That's absurd," she stammered, the laughter gone from her voice. "Kyle? He was probably just ordering supplies for facilities. It must be an inventory mistake, a simple clerical error." "A clerical error," I repeated, my voice quiet. I finally spoke. I turned to my laptop and tapped a key. Vivian's Culture of Care slide vanished. In its place was a screenshot of the anonymous email I had received at 21:15. "Don't present tomorrow. They are not messing around. It's not worth it. Take a sick day." "This," I said, "is not a clerical error. This is intent." "An anonymous email?" Vivian scoffed, grasping for leverage. "It could be from any disgruntled employee. Avery. It proves nothing." "You're right," I said. "On its own, it's just words, but it's not anonymous." I clicked to the next slide. It showed the email's header data, a string of code. "I pulled the source metadata," I said. "The IP address of the sender." I clicked again. The IP address was now highlighted in red, next to a name. It originated from the secured guest network at the offices of Grayford Capital. The login was time-stamped at 21:14, just 1 minute before this email was sent. The 2 VCs from Grayford looked like they had been struck. One of them, a man named Sterling, looked at Vivian with an expression of pure ice. "Vivian," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What is this?" Vivian was cornered. She looked from Sterling to me, to my father, and finally to Rowan. The room was a vacuum. All the air sucked out. Rowan Maddox leaned forward. His voice was soft, exactly as it had been in the lobby 2 hours ago. He asked the same question, but it was no longer a question. It was a verdict. "Vivian, why is she limping?" This time, the entire room held its breath, and this time, Vivian had no answer. Her taut, perfect, compassionate smile had finally, completely cracked. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The blood had drained from her face, leaving a sallow, waxy mask. Her eyes, wide and frantic, darted to the Grayford Capital VCs. They looked back at her with the cold, dead expressions of men calculating the blast radius of a default. They weren't angry, they were just done. Rowan didn't wait for her to craft a new lie. The question had served its purpose. It was not a request for information. It was the starting pistol for the execution. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at Vivian again. He spoke to Hale, his voice the same calm, academic tone he'd used in the lobby. Hale, place all active contracts with Citadel Security under emergency surveillance. Full asset and communication lockdown. I want to know who at Citadel authorized the manual override of the P3B electrical box. I want the digital signature of the technician who received the request. It was a cold, strategic masterpiece. He wasn't just investigating the crime. He was investigating the infrastructure that allowed it. He was cutting off her escape routes. Citadel was the third-party vendor Vivian herself had championed and hired 6 months ago, replacing the company Norcrest had used for 20 years. Hale, who had never stopped working on his tablet, nodded once. The query is already sent, sir. Citadel's system logs are being mirrored to our external vault. We will have the signature key within the hour. It will be tied to a specific employee ID and the device that issued the command. Vivian's composure snapped. This is insane, she burst out, her voice high and thin. You can't just... This is an accusation. Based on what? A faulty camera and a clerical error by my assistant? Hale looked up from his tablet, his eyes blank. Speaking of clerical errors, Ms. Maddox? He tapped a key, and the main screen, which still showed the incriminating IP address from Grayford, was replaced by a new document. It was a simple internal form, a digital workers' compensation and workplace safety report. It was blank. This is the official accident report form for Ms. Avery Lane, Hale stated. Per Norcrest policy, any workplace injury, particularly one occurring on company property, must be reported by the supervising department head to Human Resources within 2 hours of the start of the next business day. He let the silence hang. It is now 10:30 a.m. Ms. Lane's injury was made public in the lobby at 8:05 a.m. No report has been filed. The department responsible for receiving, processing, and escalating this report is Human Resources. The executive responsible for that division is you, Ms. Maddox. This was the second blade. The first was the assault. The second was the cover-up. He had established a motive for the assault, to stop my presentation, and now had just proven a deliberate, real-time breach of fiduciary duty and corporate policy. I hadn't been notified, Vivian stammered, grasping for a foothold. Kyle, my assistant, he handles the intake. It's a simple administrative oversight. He's new. He must have what, Vivian? Rowan interrupted, his voice cutting through her excuse like ice. Been the same person who used his badge to access the garage? The same person who bought the wire? The same person who failed to file the report on the very person he was sent to incapacitate? I am not responsible for the panic of a junior employee, she shot back, her voice desperate. This is his mistake, a terrible, misguided. I agree, Rowan said. He leaned back in his chair, a move that was deeply, profoundly menacing. It was a mistake, a lazy, stupid mistake. He turned his gaze to the CFO. Mr. Davies, I want an immediate freeze on all expense accounts tied to the Human Resources Employee Wellness Initiative. Everything, all 4 quarters, retroactive. The CFO, a man who lived and died by the spreadsheet, just nodded, his fingers already flying on his own laptop. Consider it frozen, Rowan. Vivian looked genuinely confused now. This pivot made no sense to her. The wellness budget? What does that have to do with this? It's for yoga classes, mental health apps. We are building a culture of care. Rowan, this is exactly what... Hale, Rowan said, cutting her off again. The screen changed. The blank report was gone. In its place was a list of transactions, a ledger. This, Hale said, is the list of payments from the Employee Wellness Fund for the last 12 months. The primary vendor, as you can see, is a group called the Stonebrook Wellness Collective. I felt my heart quicken. This was it. This was the core of the report in my portfolio. I had found the anomaly 3 weeks ago. I had been pulling the thread, and they knew it. Stonebrook was paid $2.8 million over 4 quarters, Hale continued, his voice a relentless monotone. The payments were for a series of 52 mandatory executive wellness workshops that, according to our attendance logs, none of our executives ever attended. The 2 Grayford VCs were now pale. This was no longer assault. This was wire fraud. We conducted a search on the Stonebrook Wellness Collective, Hale said. It is a shell corporation. It has no website. It has no employees. It is registered to a P.O. box in Delaware, with a single beneficial owner. He clicked. A new slide appeared. A name. The owner, Hale said, is a Mr. Julian Vance, your brother, Ms. Maddox. That's a lie, Vivian shrieked, half rising from her chair. My father, next to her, looked like he was going to be sick. Is it? Hale countered. He clicked again. A flowchart appeared on the screen. It was brutally simple. Box 1. Norcrest Biowell. Employee Wellness Fund. Arrow to Box 2. Stonebrook Wellness Collective. Julian Vance. Arrow to Box 3. Vance Global Consulting LLC. Second shell. Arrow to Box 4. A numbered bank account in the Cayman Islands. The money, Hale narrated, as if teaching a class, was transferred from Norcrest to Stonebrook for services. It was then moved from Stonebrook to Vance Global for consulting. From there, it was deposited into this account, an account, Ms. Maddox, to which you are the sole signatory. The room was a crypt. The sound of Vivian's harsh, ragged breathing was the only sound. The culture of care wasn't a policy. It was a $2.8 million slush fund. It was her personal piggy bank. She was trying to stop you from presenting this, my father whispered, looking at me for the first time. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. This is circumstantial, Vivian tried. One last, desperate lunge. You have no proof. You can't tie me to any of it. You can't prove I knew what Kyle was doing. You can't prove I knew about my brother's business. Hale looked at Rowan. Rowan gave a single, slow nod. We had, Hale said, a standing order to monitor internal communications for high-risk executives following the Grayford acquisition. Your entire email server, Ms. Maddox, is archived, including the deletions. He clicked the remote. One final image appeared on the screen. It was a screenshot of a restored email. It was from Vivian's official Norcrest account, sent at 9:02 p.m. last night. It was sent to one recipient, Kyle Devon. The subject line, The Avery Problem. The body was short, 2 sentences. She is presenting the Stonebrook numbers tomorrow. Ensure she is absent. Ensure she is absent, not talk to her, not buy her off. Ensure she is absent. It was the order, the irrefutable, explicit, written-down order that tied the fraud directly to the assault. Vivian Maddox finally, completely, collapsed into her chair. She said nothing. She just stared at the screen. Her life's work, her entire intricate web of lies, displayed for the gods of the 27th floor to see. Rowan Maddox watched her for a long, cold moment. He neither smiled nor frowned. His expression didn't change. I hate laziness more than I hate greed. Vivian, he said, his voice almost gentle. The greed was predictable. The fraud was uninspired, but functional. But this? He gestured. A small, dismissive wave of his hand that encompassed the Ziploc bag on the table, the email on the screen, my throbbing ankle. This was lazy. You thought a $20 wire and a bottle of brake fluid was a solution. You thought we were stupid. You were lazy. He turned to Hale. You have the order? Hale produced a single sheet of paper from his leather folder and placed it in front of Rowan. My grandfather took a thick, heavy black fountain pen from his jacket. He uncapped it, the sound a small, sharp click in the dead silence. He signed the paper with a flourish. His signature was still strong. He slid it to Hale. "Summon the entire company," Rowan Maddox said. "Auditorium, 4 p.m. This, culture of care, is over." The boardroom had become a legal blast crater. The air was thick with the fallout of accusation and proof. Vivian was a statue of pure, white-hot shock, her hands flat on the granite table as if to hold herself upright. The two VCs from Grayford Capital were already on their feet, not looking at anyone, their phones pressed to their ears as they paced by the windows, speaking in low, urgent, brutal tones. They were no longer board members. They were legal entities, disconnecting themselves from a toxic asset. My father looked at me, his face a mask of gray disbelief. "Avery," he whispered, but the name just hung in the air, unfinished. He didn't know the question to ask. The company's general counsel, Maria Thorne, who had been sitting silently at the far end of the table, finally spoke. Her voice was the only calm one in the room. It was the voice of legal necessity. "Rowan, board members," she said, addressing the room. "Based on the evidence presented by Auditor Hale and the complaint from Ms. Lane, we are now facing several concurrent catastrophic legal exposures." She began to tick them off on her fingers, her tone analytical, as if dissecting a case study. An active workplace endangerment and targeted harassment. The evidence, the wire, the fluid, the email, points to a deliberate, premeditated act to cause physical harm to an employee on company property. This is not just an OSHA violation. It is aggravated assault. The fact that the target was a compliance officer set to deliver a damaging report makes this a criminal conspiracy to obstruct. Vivian flinched, as if slapped. That is a vile accusation." Thorne didn't even look at her. 2. Gross misuse of corporate assets and wire fraud. The Stonebrook Wellness Initiative is not a clerical error. It is a textbook case of self-dealing, a clear breach of the duty of loyalty. The $2.8 million funneled to a shell company owned by a family member constitutes a material fact that was deliberately withheld from the board and, by extension, from our shareholders. The SEC will be deeply interested in this. The Grayford VC stopped pacing. The word SEC had a physical gravitational pull. "And 3, Thorne continued, her gaze finally landing on Vivian. "A catastrophic failure of our internal controls. The HR department, under Ms. Maddox's leadership, was the one place the assault should have been reported. Mr. Hale has established that the department willfully failed to file a workers' compensation claim or an internal safety report." I spoke, my voice cutting across the room. It was cold, colder than I thought I was capable of. "It's worse than that, Maria." They all looked at me. I was, for the first time, in command of this room. "My injury, this limp," I said, gesturing to my ankle, "is now a temporary documented physical disability by causing the injury and then actively suppressing the report. The HR department has exposed Norcrest to a flagrant violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. They didn't just fail to accommodate a disability, they created it and then covered it up to avoid a third-party investigation. Our liability on this count alone is uncapped." Thorne nodded, her expression grim. She understood immediately. I had just handed her the kill shot. I turned to my laptop, which was still open to the incriminating email. I opened a new message. The addressees were Maria Thorne, Rowan Maddox, Auditor Hale, and the entire board of directors. The subject line was, "Formal complaint and evidence, A. Lane." "For the official record," I said, as my fingers typed, "I am now filing my formal complaint, detailing the assault on P3, the targeted harassment, and the financial malfeasance I was investigating." I attached the single, encrypted archive I had built at 2 a.m. in my apartment, the vault file containing the time-stamped photos, the video of the wire, the server logs, the badge swipes, the anonymous email, and my full 40-page report on the Stonebrook fraud. The file contains the complete chain of custody evidence package I compiled at 22:45 last night. I said. I hit send. The click of the key was a gavel. Maria Thorne's laptop pinged. She looked down, read the subject line, and nodded. Received. Thank you, Avery. In light of this official, documented complaint, my recommendation is no longer a recommendation. It is a legal necessity. She stood up. I am advising the board that we must take immediate action to preserve the integrity of the corporate data. I move for the immediate, indefinite administrative suspension of Ms. Vivian Maddox, Mr. Kyle Devon, and all direct reports in the HR, Wellness, and Internal Audit divisions, pending a full, independent, external investigation. All access, physical and digital, must be revoked, now. Seconded, one of the Grayford VCs said instantly. His phone call apparently finished. All in favor, Rowan said. It wasn't a vote. It was a statement. Every hand, except my father's and Vivian's, went up. My father just sat there, broken, staring at the granite. The meeting was over. It dissolved. Hale and Thorne were already on their phones, activating the protocols, security, external counsel. The machine was in motion. As I began to gather my things, slowly, painfully, a voice stopped me. Avery? It was Vivian. She had come around the table. Her face was a terrible, desperate mask. The calculating executive was gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified something. My father stood a few feet behind her, looking hollow. Avery, don't let them do this, she said, her voice a low, frantic whisper. We can fix this. I just stared at her. The audacity, even now, was breathtaking. Talk to her. David, she pleaded, turning to my father. Tell her. This is a misunderstanding. It's just a stupid mistake. Kyle, he misunderstood. He went too far. It was never meant to hurt you. Just slow you down. Make you rest. My father just looked at her, his eyes dead. He had nothing. She turned back to me, trying to find a leverage point, and landed on the one she had always used. Avery, please, we are family. The word sounded obscene coming from her. We can handle this internally, she rushed on, her words tumbling over each other. Think of your father. Think of the company, the stock, a public thing. It will destroy us. It will destroy your grandfather's legacy. I can fix the Stonebrook account. I can pay it back. We can just call it a loan, a family loan. Please, Avery, don't do this to your father. I stood there, leaning on the table, the hot, sharp pain in my ankle a grounding, clarifying force. I looked at her, at this woman who had married my father, slept in my grandmother's bed, and ordered me to be absent. Family, I said, my voice so low she had to lean in to hear it, is a place where people don't string high-tensile wire across a parking garage. Her face crumpled. You stopped being family when you put a price on my safety, I continued. And the price was $2.8 million, says. You didn't do this to my father. You did this to yourself. Avery, she whispered, her hand starting to reach for my arm. Don't, I said. She flinched and pulled her hand back. A new voice joined us. Hale. He was standing by the door, phone in hand, looking at Rowan. PwC is on standby. They are sealing the servers and taking possession of the evidence vault as we speak. The chain of custody is unbroken and will be handled by a third party. Rowan nodded, buttoning his jacket. He walked past Vivian as if she were a piece of furniture. He stopped in front of the remaining board members. Transparency, he said, his voice echoing in the now cavernous room, is non-negotiable. We do not hide. We do not handle things internally. We excise, we clean, and we show the world that we are clean. Is that understood? The board members nodded, pale and silent. My phone buzzed. So did everyone else's. The summons had been sent. A mandatory, all-company meeting. I looked at the screen. From Office of the Chairman. Subject, Mandatory all-hands meeting, regarding how we treat each other. I closed my laptop. The sound was a soft, final click. I walked past Vivian, past my father, and out of the glass box in the sky, my limp a steady, painful, and triumphant rhythm. The lobby was a sea of bodies. At 4 p.m., the glass atrium, normally a vast, empty space of white stone and cold air, was transformed. Over 800 employees had been summoned, filling the main floor and packing the glass-walled mezzanine above. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a compressed, anxious, silent mass. The atmosphere was thick with rumor and confusion. The company's massive digital screens, which usually displayed biotech stock tickers and PR announcements, were dark. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation and the nervous shifting of 800 pairs of feet. It was being live-streamed. A small, discreet camera on a tripod was pointed at the podium. Its red light, a single, malevolent eye. Whatever happened here would be seen by the entire company, from the labs in San Diego to the sales offices in Berlin. I stood near the front, off to the side, next to Hale. My grandfather, Rowan, was at the simple podium. The rest of the board was conspicuously absent, as was my father. They were observers now, not participants. But Vivian was here. She had been required to attend. She stood in the front row, opposite me, a quarantine zone of empty space around her. Her face was a mask of rigid, terrified composure. She was still dressed in her expensive charcoal gray dress, but it looked different now. Not a uniform of power, but a costume. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. I could see the edge of the hammered silver bracelet peeking out from her cuff. The PA system clicked on, the sound echoing sharply off the glass. Rowan tapped the microphone once. The room fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. He didn't look at his notes. He looked out at the faces, the hundreds of people who worked for him, his gaze sweeping across them. "We have a slogan in this lobby," he began, his voice calm, amplified, filling every corner. "Healing through transparency, a good slogan, but it's meaningless until it costs you something." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This morning, I asked our head of compliance why she was limping. The answer to that question has cost us a great deal. It has uncovered a sickness, not a sickness of the body, but a sickness of our culture. And you cannot heal what you refuse to see." He gestured to the dark screens. "We are told we have a culture of care. I wanted to see what that culture looked like in practice. Mr. Hale." Rowan stepped back. Hale stepped forward. The screens lit up. There was no presentation, no branding, just raw data. The first image was the P3 security log, a simple, stark spreadsheet. 2145, P3B, signal loss. 2222, P3B, signal restored. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The next slide, the badge access log. 2148, K. Devon, exit, P3 stairwell. 2212, K. Devon, entry, P3 stairwell. The murmur grew. People were turning to look at the HR contingent, clustered together in the crowd, their faces pale. The next slide, the purchase invoice. Item, 1L DOT4 brake fluid. Item, 50-fit braided steel wire. Paid, $78.41. Corporate card, K. Devon, Dept, Human Resources. A new sound joined the murmur. Sharp, indrawn breaths, the hiss of scandal. And finally, Hale's voice was a cold digital scalpel. The Culture of Care Initiative, the $2.8 million in payments to the Stonebrook Wellness Collective. The flowchart from the boardroom appeared, the simple damming diagram, Norcrest to Stonebrook, Stonebrook to Vance Global to the Cayman account, and at the bottom, the two beneficial owners, Julian Vance and Vivian Maddox. The crowd erupted. It was no longer a murmur. It was a roar. A wave of sound so loud it seemed to shake the glass walls. People were pointing, talking openly, turning to stare at Vivian. She stood alone, unmoving, as the full, focused, horrified attention of the entire company descended upon her. "This is not true," she shouted, her voice high and thin, trying to cut through the noise. The PA system wasn't on for her. No one could hear her. She took 2 steps toward the podium, her face a rictus of panic. "This is not true." The crowd quieted, eager for the confrontation. "This is a complete data misinterpretation," she yelled, her voice echoing unnaturally in the atrium. "It's a clerical mistake. It's a lie." "A misinterpretation," Hale repeated, his voice amplified by the microphone, drowning hers out. He looked at her. "You are correct. Ms. Maddox, the data is incomplete. There is one final piece." He tapped his remote. The screens changed. It was video. The quality was poor. It was grainy, black and white, the timestamp in the corner reading 21:51. The angle was odd, shot from low down, looking through the rectangular window of a fire escape door. It was the backup camera, the one that wasn't on the main security feed, the analog one, wired to the fire system, that was only activated when the stairwell door was opened, the one Kyle Devon had opened at 21:48, inadvertently turning it on. The footage showed my parking space, P3B, partially obscured by a concrete pillar. And there, in the center of the frame, was a figure. The atrium went dead silent. 800 people, watching a ghost. The figure was dressed in dark clothes. We watched as it bent down, its back to the camera. We saw the quick, efficient movements as it tied something to the base of the pillar. We saw it string the wire across to the other pillar. We saw it stand up, walk to the side of my car, and kick something underneath. The small, dark shape of the brake fluid bottle. This is ridiculous," Vivian whispered, but her voice was shaking. "It could be anyone. It's a stranger, a vandal." "The image is unclear," Hale agreed, his voice a monotone. The figure on the screen, having finished its work, turned to leave, walking back toward the fire escape stairwell, back toward the camera. But the light in the stairwell caught a few details as the subject passed the door. On screen, the figure turned. It was just a silhouette. But as it passed the door, the light from the stairwell flashed, just for a frame. On its wrist, a glint of metal. Hale froze the frame. The image was blurry, a hand, reaching for the door handle, a wrist, a flash of silver. "Enhance D4, Hale said to the technician. The image pixelated, then sharpened. It was still grainy, but it was clear, a woman's hand, and on the wrist, a wide, hammered silver bracelet with a distinctive, irregular edge. I didn't have to look. I knew that bracelet. I had seen her wear it every single day since she married my father. A collective gasp, a single, unified sound, left 800 chests. The crowd turned. As one, from the screen to the woman standing in front of them, they stared at the frozen image of the bracelet, and then they stared at the identical bracelet on Vivian's wrist. She knew. She looked down at her own arm as if it had betrayed her. She made a small animal sound in the back of her throat and tried to pull her sleeve down to cover it. But it was too late. Everyone had seen. The connection was made. The fraud and the wire, the money and the violence, were now, in the mind of the entire company, tied to the woman in the gray dress. The sound that rose was a low, rising hiss, the sound of collective judgment. I stood there, watching her, and a strange, physical thing happened. The sharp, metallic, crushing pain in my left ankle, the pain that had been a constant scream for 12 hours, suddenly went numb. It was still there, but the heat was gone. It was like the steel wire that had been tightening around it all day had just been snipped. The hissing stopped, cut off. As Rowan stepped back to the microphone, the atrium was a vacuum once more. He looked past the crowd, past the screens, past the woman he had welcomed into his family. His eyes found mine. He didn't have to shout. The microphone carried his voice to every corner of the glass house. He asked the question for the third and final time, but this time, it was for everyone. "Avery Lane, why are you limping?" I didn't walk to the podium. I stood where I was. I didn't need a microphone. I tilted my head and let my voice, sharp and clear and cold, cut through the silence. I looked directly at Vivian. Because someone in power thought no one would dare to ask. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rowan looked out at the 800 employees. He looked at the frozen image on the screen. He looked at Vivian, who was shaking. Her mask of composure shattered into a million pieces. "Now," Rowan Maddox said, his voice a final, terrible judgment. "Someone has," the sound of Rowan's voice, a final, terrible judgment, was still hanging in the glass and steel atrium. 800 people held their breath, a single, collective lung, all eyes, which had been locked on the frozen, damning image of Vivian's bracelet, now turned. They followed Rowan's gaze, and they landed on me. This was the moment. This was the fulcrum on which the entire company would pivot, or collapse. I felt the dull, deep throb in my ankle, a hot, heavy, grounding sensation. It was a strange, cold anchor. It kept me from floating away on the adrenaline. It kept me focused. My grandfather, Rowan, had asked his question. I had given my answer. Now, the silence was begging for the solution. With a measured, deliberate calm, I stepped away from the wall. I began to walk toward the podium. The crowd parted. No one touched me, but I felt the weight of their gaze as I moved. I did not hide the limp. I did not favor it or exaggerate it. I simply moved with it. It was a part of the story now. A physical, undeniable fact in a room full of lies. Each step was a quiet, painful testament. Right foot, strong. Left foot, drag. Right foot, strong. Left foot, drag. The sound of my own unsteady progress was a counter-rhythm to the nervous silence. I reached the podium. Rowan was still standing there, a granite figure. He looked at me, his eyes clear and intense. In that single look, a lifetime of understanding passed between us. He had seen my stubbornness as a child. He had seen my meticulousness as a lawyer, and now he was seeing the fusion of the two. He did something then that shifted the axis of the entire company. He stepped back. He didn't just move aside. He stepped fully back from the podium, leaving it empty, a small wooden island in a sea of tension. And then, with a small, discreet gesture, he indicated the microphone. He was ceding the floor. He had acted as the prosecutor. He was now handing the room to me, the architect. I stepped up. I planted my right foot, my good foot, firmly on the small riser. Taking my full weight, I let my left foot rest, the throbbing pain a reminder of the cost. I reached down and placed my black leather portfolio on the lectern, the same portfolio I had twisted my body to protect in the fall, the portfolio they had tried to keep from this very room. My hands were perfectly steady. I unzipped it. I didn't pull out the 40-page Stonebrook audit. Hale had already delivered that killing blow. The company didn't need another diagnosis. It needed the cure. I pulled out a different, thinner document, a 10-page plan I had drafted, edited, and perfected in my office over the last 2 years, waiting for the moment I had the power to implement it. It was the original ethics framework I had proposed on my first day as head of compliance, the one Vivian herself had buried, calling it a bureaucratic impediment to agile growth, in a curt, dismissive email. The title was simple, printed on the cover sheet. The Norcrest Integrity Charter. No one is above their own laws. I placed it on the podium and looked up, not at Rowan, not at Vivian, but at the 800 employees staring at me. My grandfather is right, I said. My voice, amplified by the microphone, was clear and cold, with no trace of the tremor I felt in my ankle. It hit the glass walls and echoed back, solid and sure. A sickness was uncovered today, but a diagnosis is useless without a treatment plan. What you just saw, I gestured to the dark screens, is the symptom. The disease is a culture that allowed one person and one department to operate with total impunity. That culture was built on a lie. It was built on the idea that human resources was a place to protect employees, but it was co-opted. It became a fortress to protect the powerful and a weapon to silence the victims. I saw heads nodding in the crowd. I saw the maintenance staff, the lab technicians, the marketing associates. I saw the fear in their eyes, a fear that, even now, she would somehow survive this. I had to kill that fear. That ends, not next quarter, not tomorrow. It ends right now. I looked down at my charter. Here is the remediation. This is not a proposal. This is the new policy. 1, I said, my voice sharp. A command. The contract with Citadel Security is terminated, effective immediately. They were complicit in the assault on P3. Their access is being revoked as I speak. A new external security vendor, vetted by a third party and reporting only to General Counsel, will be on site by 6 a.m. tomorrow. A wave of shock. Firing a vendor this publicly was unheard of. 2. The current ethics hotline is a sham. It reports directly to the department that committed the fraud. As of this moment, that hotline is permanently offline. It is being replaced by a third-party whistleblower protection service, operated and managed entirely by an external, independent law firm. No one at Norcrest, not me, not Mr. Maddox, not the board, will ever know the identity of a complainant. All reports will be legally privileged. Retaliation will no longer be a career risk. It will be a crime. This was the core. I could feel the tension in the room change. It was the sound of 800 people daring to breathe again. 3. I have already trained 2 new internal investigators in my own department. I pointed to 2 associates I'd quietly had certified, who were standing in the crowd. They are now fully empowered, with my authority, to investigate any claim, at any level, with full access. Their sole mandate is to protect this company's employees from its own power structure. We will protect our own. I paused and took a breath. This next part was not in the plan. It was personal. I know, I said, my voice softening. What many of you are thinking, you've seen things, you've heard things, and you stayed silent. You stayed silent because the people in charge were powerful, because they were family. I looked across the atrium. Vivian was staring at me, her face no longer hateful, but hollow. She was defeated, and she knew it. I was afraid, too. I admitted. The confession hung in the vast, silent room. I was afraid of this moment. I was afraid of the conflict, of what it would do to my father, of the damage it would do to the company my grandmother built. I was afraid of her. I thought I could fight it with silence. I thought I could build my case in the dark, gather my data, and let the system work. I was wrong. I let my gaze travel across the crowd, meeting the eyes of the people I was now responsible for. My silence didn't protect the company. It protected the guilty. My silence enabled the fraud. My silence was the permission they needed to escalate from theft to violence. My silence is why I am standing on one foot. I turned my head and looked directly at the woman in the gray dress. My silence ends here. Nothing. The word hung in the air. Then, from the back of the crowd, a single sound, a clap. It was sharp, singular, defiant. Then another, from the mezzanine, and another, from the facility staff. It wasn't the polite, rolling applause of a corporate town hall. It was a sparse, angry, percussive wave of support. It was the sound of people taking a side. It grew, not into a roar, but into a steady, defiant, deafening ovation. It was the sound of a spell breaking. I watched as people who worked in Vivian's own department, people on her team, slowly, grimly, began to clap. They were clapping for their own liberation. I let it wash over the room for a full 10 seconds. Then I raised my hand. The sound died, instantly. "This is not a celebration," I said, my voice cold and hard again. "This is a procedure." I turned to where Hale was standing, a silent shadow. He stepped forward and handed me the single, formal sheet of paper, the one Rowan had signed in the boardroom. "This," I announced, holding it up for all to see, "is the formal motion from the General Counsel's office, supported by the chairman. recommending the immediate and permanent suspension of Vivian Maddox and Kyle Devon for cause, per our bylaws. This motion is being submitted for an emergency vote by the Board of Directors, to be concluded within the next hour. The result will be binding, and it will be public. I placed the motion on the podium. It was done. I turned to look at my grandfather. He was still standing behind me, out of the spotlight, watching me. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I saw Rowan Maddox truly smile. It was not a warm smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the sharp, thin, cold, and deeply satisfied smile of a scientist who has just watched his most complex, brutal hypothesis be proven correct. It was a smile of pure, absolute, terrifying vindication. And it was aimed at me. It was the smile of a king who had just seen his heir take the field. I felt the deep, hollow ache in my left ankle. I was exhausted. But as I stood there, bathed in the harsh lights of the atrium, in front of all 800 employees, I shifted my weight. I planted my right foot, my good foot, firmly on the stone floor. I took all the pressure off my left leg, letting it finally rest. I was injured. I was in pain, but I was not limping. I was standing. The applause had died, but the silence that replaced it was heavier, denser. The verdict was in, delivered not by a jury, but by a sea of silent, staring colleagues. The all-hands meeting was over, but the execution had just begun. My speech, my treatment plan, had been the procedure. Now came the surgery. Up on the 27th floor, in the glass box of the boardroom, the emergency vote was a formality. It was conducted via secure email. The result was posted on the company intranet just 15 minutes after the meeting dispersed. Motion carried, 8-0. My father had abstained, a final, hollow act of cowardice. Effective immediately. Ms. Vivian Maddox and Mr. Kyle Devon are suspended indefinitely, pending criminal investigation. All direct reports in the HR Wellness Division are placed on mandatory administrative leave. All access is revoked. All company property is to be surrendered. The order was absolute, and the enforcement was immediate. This was not a polite, HR will contact you situation. This was a corporate decapitation. As employees filed out of the atrium in stunned, quiet clusters, a new team moved in. It was a unit of external security, not the compromised Citadel guards, flanked by 2 associates from the General Counsel's office. They moved with a quiet, swift, legal precision. They went directly to the HR wing. Vivian's team, the ones who had laughed in the lobby that morning, were met at their desks. They weren't given time to log off. Step away from the computer. Place your company phone on the desk. You will be escorted from the building. Their laptops were closed. Their phones were dropped into sealed, numbered evidence bags. Their badges were deactivated. It was clinical. It was fast. It was brutal. Down in the lobby, Vivian was still standing where she had been left, a pariah in a gray dress, surrounded by a vast expanse of empty white stone. The employees had given her a wide, silent berth as they left. She was watching the main elevators, as if planning her escape. She saw the security team emerge from the stairwell. She saw them approach her. She turned, her last shred of dignity intact, and strode toward the private executive elevator, the one that required a special keycard access, the one that led directly from the lobby to the executive suite and then down to the P3 garage, her private escape route. She reached it. She held her badge up to the black sensor. Nothing. She tried again, her hand shaking. Nothing. A small, red light blinked. Access denied. Hale had deactivated it from the boardroom the second the vote passed. He had anticipated her every move. She was trapped. She stood there, her back to the lobby, her hands still pressed against the useless sensor. In that moment, she was no longer an EVP. She was just a person locked out of her own life. She turned around. Slowly, the security team had stopped, waiting, 10 feet away. They wouldn't touch her. They would just wait. Her eyes scanned the nearly empty lobby. She saw Rowan, standing with Hale by the main desk, and she saw me, standing alone by the main glass doors, my portfolio in my hand. She began to walk toward me, not at Rowan, not at the guards, at me. Her steps were slow, deliberate. The sound of her heels on the stone was the only sound. She was no longer the desperate, panicked woman from the podium. This was something else. This was cold. She stopped 3 feet from me. Her face was a mask of pale, controlled fury. Her eyes were empty. All the manipulative warmth burned out of them. "You will regret this," she said. Her voice was not a shout. It was a low, venomous promise. "You think you've won. You think you're your grandfather. You're just a girl in a broken shoe. And you've destroyed your father to get what you want." I stood my ground, my weight on my right foot. I looked at her, at the hammered silver bracelet on her wrist. I felt the throb in my ankle, a dull, factual ache. "If people regretted things at the right time," I said, my voice just as quiet, "we wouldn't need cameras in parking garages." Her face tightened. She had wanted a fight. She had wanted tears, or anger. I gave her a procedure. I gave her a fact. "Ms. Maddox," one of the security guards said, stepping forward, "we need you to come with us." She didn't look at him. She held my gaze for 1 second longer, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Then she turned and walked away, flanked by the 2 guards, who guided her toward a side exit. I watched her go. I felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just the cold, clean feeling of a system that had finally, brutally, worked. "Avery." It was Rowan's voice. I turned. He was at the main security desk with Hale. He was signing papers. He pushed one across the desk to me, along with his heavy black fountain pen. "A formality," he said. I looked down. It was a 1-page document, an executive order. It transferred all oversight of the Norcrest Global Ethics and Compliance Program and the newly independent Internal Investigations Division directly to my office. It gave me full budgetary control, final authority, and a direct, unfiltered reporting line to the chairman, to him. It was the document I had been fighting for 2 years. I signed my name. He slid another document over. This one was from the General Counsel's office. "This one," he said, "is for restitution." I read the first line. It was the formal instruction to counsel to begin all necessary civil proceedings against Vivian Maddox and her co-conspirators, to claw back all misappropriated funds, bonuses, and salaries, and to seek punitive damages for corporate endangerment and personal injury. He was not just firing her, he was bankrupting her. He was taking every dollar she had stolen, and every dollar she had been paid while stealing it. "Hale," Rowan said, as he put his pen away. "The authorities?" "The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District has been notified of the wire fraud," Hale said, as if reading a weather report. "A full data package from PwC is being delivered to their financial crimes unit. They are interested. They will likely be in contact by morning." It was over. The lie was dead. The cover-up was impossible. The consequences were now in the hands of the federal government. Rowan nodded. "Good. Get her car keys from security. You'll drive Avery home." I looked up. "I can drive?" "No," Rowan said. It was not a suggestion. "You can't. You're injured, and your car is a crime scene." He was right. Hale nodded and left. I turned back to the atrium. The last of the employees were filing out the main glass doors. As they left, they formed a natural, unconscious aisle. Vivian was being led through it. No one spoke. No one said goodbye. No one wished her well. No one looked her in the eye. They just watched, their faces silent and grim, as the woman who had run their lives, the woman who had hosted the Culture of Care workshops, was escorted out of the building like a common criminal. She passed through the doors. I watched her through the glass as she was led to an unmarked car. The heavy glass doors slid shut with a soft, final hiss. The lobby was empty. It was just me. I stood there, watching my own reflection in the vast, darkening glass. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the atrium were white and unflinching. They showed the strain around my eyes, the pallor of my skin, but the reflection that stared back at me was a stranger. She was not the girl who had walked in that morning, terrified and in pain. She was not the woman from the boardroom, shaking with adrenaline. My face, in the glass, was perfectly, absolutely still. I was not trembling. The last of the employee whispers faded. The atrium, which had thrummed with the energy of 800 people, was now a vast, empty hall of stone and glass, returning to its cold, sterile equilibrium. Hale had moved off to finalize the transport details, his footsteps silent. It was just Rowan and me, standing near the silent main desk. The lights of the city were beginning to show against the deepening blue of the twilight sky. He turned to me. The chairman was gone. The prosecutor was gone. It was just my grandfather. He looked, not at my face, but at my left foot, which I had resting on the floor, the pressure off. "Now," he said, his voice quiet, no longer needing to command a room. "Why are you limping?" This was not the public test. This was not the setup for a trap. This was the final question, the one he actually wanted the answer to. I met his gaze. The lies were gone. The strategies were finished. "Because I kept walking," I said, my voice low and clear, even when someone wanted me to fall. A small, almost imperceptible nod. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit and removed a single, thin, white envelope. He held it out. I took it. It wasn't sealed. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, a formal company memo. The title was stark: Interim Appointment, Chief Ethics Officer. "The person holding the light must walk first," he said, his voice flat, a statement of fact. "Even when it hurts." He handed me his pen, the heavy, black fountain pen. I unfolded the memo on the cold granite of the desk and signed my name. As I completed the loop on the E of Lane, a physical sensation coursed through me. The tight, agonizing, steel wire grip that had been crushing my ankle for 14 hours didn't vanish, but it released. The crushing tension was gone. It was just a dull, manageable ache. The wire had been cut. A sound at the main doors made me look up. It was Vivian. She was flanked by the 2 external security guards, being led across the lobby from a side office. She was not in handcuffs, but she was a prisoner. She was walking stiffly, her head held high, a last brittle performance of defiance. The harsh white fluorescent lights of the atrium, designed to expose every flaw, pinned her. The light flashed on her wrist as she moved. The hammered silver bracelet was gone. Her wrist was pale, bare, and thin. It had been collected, logged, bagged, evidence. She passed the spot where she had stood that morning, laughing at my limp. She saw us standing there, me with the pen in my hand, him with his hands clasped behind his back. Her eyes met mine. There was no hatred left. There was no anger. There was just a void, a cold, black, absolute nothing. I watched her pass. I said nothing. There was, at last, nothing left to say. The main glass doors slid open. She was led through. The doors slid shut with a soft, final hiss. She was gone. Rowan turned to Hale, who had returned, holding a set of keys. "Notify the entire company," Rowan said. Hale looked at the memo in my hand, then back to Rowan. "The new appointment, sir?" "The new policy," Rowan corrected. That afternoon, a single, short bulletin appeared on the Norcrest intranet. It was sent to every employee, in every office, worldwide. It contained no names. It contained no details of the fraud or the assault. It just said, "Transparency begins with the question why." The scene was static. The glass house was clean. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us. We would love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let us know, and feel free to share your thoughts on the story. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like the video, and support us by hitting that hype button. It really helps this story get heard by more people.